I was playing chess with a guy once. I was losing the game, and I made the point to him that I will be using asymmetrical warfare to win this game. Now, there's no way for me to absolutely know that, but that's more sort of strategy to which is available to the party that's weaker. He chided me in this, pretending or pushing me, saying that that doesn't exist and that's not a real word. Now, he lost that game. Now, he lost that game because I did exactly what I said I was going to do. There are certain things that a weaker party have to do in order to maintain themselves against a stronger party. Fighting a symmetrical war when you can't win a symmetrical war is pointless. Asymmetrical warfare is just warfare that is being done in a way that is not having two sides of equal girth. This is not Soviet Union versus the United States. If that's my point. That's what I'm getting at. This is not two sides in a pitched battle of sorts. One side is considerably weaker, and the weaker side has to accept certain realities, but within those realities, resist, get advantages, transform those advantages, survive. Asymmetrical warfare. It's one thing to see that play on a chessboard. It's another thing to see that play out in real life. What is taking place right now between Iran and the United States is, for the most part, a real life equivalent of a battle that is taking place in an asymmetric way. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. And as I was saying before, asymmetrical warfare, it is an interesting thing on a chessboard. It is an amazing thing to watch, especially with what's at stake. I mean, in real world terms, we're talking about an existential threat to Iran. The tapdog that Donald Trump has put in charge of this mission wants regime change. Regardless of what Donald Trump wants, that should be a disturbing point, considering that that was the person that was there with weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and still believes that that choice was okay and accurate. That should be problematic. Whether it's the media that's reporting anything that this person is going to say, whether it's the media reporting anything that Pompeo is going to say, considering he screamed at the height of his lungs how much of a liar he is, you have an administration that is taking a policy that is literally just there to squeeze the shit out of a country, to get them, in one case, to come to the bargaining table, or in Bolton's case, because he doesn't care, collapse the government, or provoke a confrontation that requires a military intervention that allows a pretext. This one, however, is a bit interesting. So let's talk about this just a little bit, and just to go a brief overview of what's taking place in Iraq, because at the very least we'll have this entry on my channel. By the way, if you guys enjoy the content that I put down, please consider supporting this content through PayPal or Patreon. All of the videos that I've had today have had to do with some kind of military thing or war thing or something that we're doing abroad. And all of those videos were promptly demonetized. Yeah, please like, share, or subscribe. Or if you definitely like the content, please consider supporting. The Obama administration, one of the things that I think they did right, the Iran deal. Trump gets in office and proceeds to dismantle that deal. He unilaterally pulls out. Now, the problem with this is that all of the other nations that were signatories stay in the deal and push Iran to stay in the deal. Because if you remember, Obama put this deal through because the alternative was considered to be a war. They were considered to be a military confrontation was the prevailing logic at the time of what was going to take place. And this deal was seen as a way of stopping that eventuality. And as far as we can tell, this deal has worked magnificently well. Iran has lived up to the deal. The only signatory that hasn't is the United States. Now, despite the United States pulling out of the deal, despite the United States putting in sanctions, and there's something else that needs to be understood. When the United States puts in those sanctions, European companies are not protected by this. Many of these European companies flake, especially the big name companies like Total, I think that's in France. They pull out because ultimately they have business in the United States and they don't want to risk their business for Iran. So you have a situation where Iran decided to be a part of a deal in order to get relief from sanctions, and the signatories of that deal have not lived up to that deal. However, they are continually telling Iran that they need to live up to the deal. Now, Iran has come out and says, look, we are not going to be the only ones that remain a part of this deal. You guys have done nothing to alleviate what we're dealing with in regards to the sanctions and everything else in a way it's biting into our economy. Why should we be the only ones living up to this deal? And they said some of the provision of this deal we're going to, let's say, degrade, meaning they're going to start producing more material. Now, the Western powers angrily, how dare you, you better not do that. Angrily, bitterly, screaming at them, saying, how dare you, you better not change part of this deal that we've agreed upon. Why aren't you being that belligerent towards the United States? If you have all of these members who are signatories of a deal, how are you being belligerent towards them, but you're not this belligerent towards the United States? I don't understand that at all. Are all of these equal nations that are engaging in somewhat of a deal? And if these are equal nations that are engaging in somewhat of a deal, how on earth does one nation get the run roughshod? And when the other nation that was a part of this deal starts to pull back on this because nobody else is attending to the deal, how can you angrily shake your fist at them for this? The United States has taken a policy of maximum pressure, meaning Donald Trump wants to bring Iran to a negotiating table. The problem with this is Iran will never do that for the same reason that the United States doesn't negotiate with hostages. You don't necessarily want to create a precedent where the person can blow off deals without a consequence. Behind me is Mike Pompeo in Brussels. Mike Pompeo was not supposed to be here in Brussels. This is the JCPOA meeting, and the United States is pulled out of this meeting. But here he is nonetheless. Mike Pompeo is trying to get support for something pertaining to Iran. Mike Pompeo leaves here empty-handed. They tell him to kick rocks. The United States is alone and isolated on this. The rest of the world is firmly in the camp of Iran in this. And part of the reason that they're telling Iran to don't do anything for this deal is because they want the United States to remain isolated and to not give any kind of pretext whatsoever with regards to some reason for a potential unilateral attack. Let's go further into this for the moment. Asymmetrical warfare. So the United States has started to build up a presence, saying that they have intelligence that requires them to send this, this destroyer ship, and that may not be essentially aircraft carrier, to the Gulf. Now, this is a provocation and a severe escalation. Already you have sanctions. Already you have these sanctions that are biting and tightening, trying to take oil down to zero and threatening to sanction any of these other countries that do deals with Iran in this case, meaning you've blockaded the country. And keep in mind, this is also during the time of immense flooding in that country. People are dying as a result of the sanctions that we have passed. Iran has a problem, though. The United States is a superpower, and it has shown the propensity to go it alone. And there are maniacs and psychopaths in this administration that is perfectly willing to go it alone. Regardless of having the moral high ground in this situation, and regardless of having the world support, it doesn't necessarily mean you are safe from attack. And the people who are in that country have to know that. Meaning, despite the United States being belligerent and wrong on this point, Iran still has to attend to certain realities. As much as it sucks, they have to attend to certain realities. That said, you can't necessarily be the thing that's laying down. And that's where this gets extremely interesting. The United States has been extremely belligerent and has threatened openly to attack the country. Openly. This is an amazing thing, just going around threatening countries. Same thing with Venezuela, but in this very specific case, Iran. What does Iran do in this situation? Now, we expect a false flag. At least that was my expectation. You have this much troop buildup in this particular region of the world. Whether it's intentional or not, it is extremely easy to have some level of accident or some level of something to take place that gets castigated as Iran has done something wrong, even if it's not directly related to Iran. They've started using words like Iranian backed, which the media just kind of runs with it, never asking the question, are they in fact Iranian backed? Part of this is a manipulation of media. Part of it is a media that loves to be manipulated in this case. But getting closer into this, a cargo ship or cargo ships are hit. Tankers. And of course, the first thing that people do, Iran did it. Now, that was the first thought. Iran comes out and says, look, we weren't responsible for this. We didn't have anything to do with this. Many people in the United States call a false flag. This is what we were expecting. The United States essentially initiated a false flag in order to attack Iran. Even the guy that worked on the deal in the Obama administration comes out and says false flag. Now, the problem here is that this likely may not have been a false flag. Now, 4 of these vessels were hit. I think he says 2 were Saudis, 1 was Norwegian, 1 was UAE. And it freaked people out because the thought was these ships aren't safe even in places that aren't near Iran or aren't near the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has leveled 2 threats. The first threat dealing with the Strait of Hormuz, meaning if we don't get our oil out, no one is going to get their oil out. That's the first one. But this is another show of power here. Now the question becomes that everybody is asking is, who's responsible? Houthi rebels have come out and say, we did it. We're responsible. Now I watched that video and I was like, God damn it, motherfucker, why are you doing that? Because regardless of whether you're backed by Iran or not, whether you were pushed or not, it doesn't matter. The United States is going to scream that those were Iranian-backed rebels. Ergo, Iran attacked these vessels. They can't prove it, but that's what they're going to say. And then I had a secondary thought, and I thought, maybe I'm wrong. Like, this is a bit more nuanced. It is very possible that Iran did push them to do this for the very reason of showing that our power in this region go beyond the Strait of Hormuz, and that there are going to be consequences for attacking us on any kind of provocation, meaning we can hit you in ways that you didn't foresee us being able to hit you. Now, there are problems with this because ultimately you tip your hand, but you tip your hand in a way that show that you have soft power or power in a way that wasn't necessarily taken into account. Meaning you bare your teeth, but you bare your teeth in a way that is not necessarily connected to you. Meaning if I am the person in Iran, I don't want a straightforward military conflict with the United States. That is going to turn out bad for me. And not just bad for me, that's going to turn out bad for the world. Because if Iran goes down, I would imagine if it was me, I would take down every last oil refinery in Saudi Arabia, every last ship that I can get my hands on. I will plunge this world into a depression. But why wouldn't you take that perspective? This is an existential threat that we're talking about from the standpoint of, or from the position of Iran. They don't have a nuclear weapon. But understand, what is the reason for the nuclear weapon? The reason for the nuclear option is to be able to say, if you take me down, I am taking you down with me. It is mutually assured destruction. Well, they don't have a nuclear weapon. However, they do have the ability to create massive amounts of chaos in that region of the world, which, while not being a nuclear weapon, can have extraordinarily disastrous consequences for the rest of the world in case they're attacked. This is a fascinating politics. If you're in the United States and you're trying to change that regime, which is Bolton's perspective, or you're Donald Trump, you're trying to bring them to the negotiating table, or you're Iran, whose your perspective is, no, we had a deal, we're not budging, and we're going to wait you out because we know that you have an election in 2 years. We're going to wait you out, buddy, because you're most likely going to lose that election. By the same token, from Donald Trump's standpoint, at this point, he has to have been told that if you don't get your plan done in 2 years, this plan falls apart. Meaning there is a time limit on this plan, which is part of the reason for the immediate escalation, immediate provocation that Donald Trump is going through, because there is a pressure cooker and a time period that this has to take place for it to have any political benefit, for one. but to have any real world consequences too. This plan is only going to fail or have an outright catastrophe. How can you have maximum pressure when they can call your bluff? Everybody knows that Donald Trump has no penchant for a war. It's not what he wants. It's not what he got elected on. And they've made it clear in the press that they've had to rein in John Bolton because Bolton has been too hawkish on this front. Meaning it is already clear that the president has a limit in regards to where he's willing to go. Bolton may not. Trump does. Which means that the strategy is doomed to fail right on the bat. Because there's no teeth at the end of it. Yes, you can pressure that society. You can make that society miserable and pissed off. But that's not going to be pissed off at the government. That's going to be pissed off at you because all of those sanctions are things that you're doing. You don't have a reason to do this. It's not something that you need to do. It's not something that the rest of the world is on your side with. In fact, they are decidedly not on your side. Even the special relationship with Britain. The United States has picked a fight with the world in this case. And in this very specific case of Iran, the world could not disagree more. Pompeo has been running around trying to get support, and he has ended up with only 3 bedfellows: a totalitarian state and an apartheid state. The biggest concern here, if I'm being honest, Iran has said we're not going to have a war with the United States because from their perspective, we just need to wait him out. Now, it is true that they've started to precipitate somewhat of a crisis here. Now, mind you, the United States precipitated a crisis, but they're upping the ante on this with the notion of saying we're going to start producing more material. But and they have the reasons for doing this. I guess my point is this. The biggest fear here is pretext, that something pops off. What Donald Trump wants is not going to matter at all. He is going to have no agency in this process. If there's intelligence that says an attack is imminent, or if something happens like this with these boats could have been the thing that sparked off a larger war. And understand the consequences of that larger war from the standpoint of the people that are going to die in the process, just like the last countries that we've left this kind of burning trail in our path, but also economics. Oil will go through the roof. You're talking about like $5, $10 a gallon. Like this is going to materially harm you in ways that Iraq did not. And this will end Donald Trump's presidency, by the way. Donald Trump needs to be very careful with the mad dog Bolton that he is using in pursuit of this, because those objectives are not the same. So I hope I'm giving somewhat of a perspective in regards to the politics. It is unclear whether or not Iran had anything to do with pushing the Houthi rebels to do that. But that's kind of the point, and why that's somewhat of a good move from the standpoint of a strategy thing. It shows that your opponent can be hit, while the same token not necessarily claiming it. However, you know that your opponent is going to assume that you are responsible for it. I hope that makes sense. Like, it's the overt from the standpoint of the public in regards to what they can confirm versus the intelligence aspect and what your opponents are going to assume. I hope that makes sense. Iran needs to show that it can hit without necessarily having its fingerprints on it. Having its fingerprints on it would be extraordinarily bad. The rebels allow that. But that's assuming that they're together. There's not necessarily a clear definitive thing showing that the Houthi rebels are backed by Iran at all. There's apparently some kind of loose affiliation. But would that loose affiliation under provocation by the United States be enough for them to show their teeth? Maybe. Maybe. From the United States standpoint, like I said, Donald Trump doesn't have any stomach to get bogged down in a regime change war, per se, even though he wants to get the regime change. I hope that makes sense. People are probably telling him that they will be able to get these people out of offices without going to those extents. The problem is that has not been shown to be true. And the moment that the dictators or the strong men know that you have a limit on this case, you have nowhere to go. What are you going to do? Are you going to try to collapse the government in this kind of thing that creates a provocation that has a momentum of its own? And by the way, we don't even know where that goes in regards to potential alliances that may be spawned out of some kind of new conflict like that, especially with this idea that the world is against us. We must understand what that means. This is not like Iraq, where you had a few of the patsy nations that went along with George Bush on this. The world is not going to go with another Iraq 2.0. It has been disastrous for Europe. Their populations have no support for it in the least. And in fact, just being on stage with Pompeo probably made Mogherini's skin crawl. It made mine crawl just looking at him. We're alone in the world on this. We're alone in the world on this. This will collapse Trump's presidency if he goes through with this. But I would make the argument that one or two things is going to happen. Either something is going to take place that Iran is blamed for, in which case the United States may use that as a pretext for a strike, seeing as there's a window that they have to get this done because Donald Trump is going to have to be running for his campaign. And I got to be honest, he's probably going to lose depending on who he runs against. So there's a time period for him to get this done. And not just that, he needs to get this done for it to be politically useful in the campaign itself. So this is going to become a pressure cooker environment that Donald Trump is going to try to initiate. The question becomes, does that brinksmanship step over a line at some point that creates events that run on their own currents? What does Europe do? What does Europe do? I'll leave this here. I don't want this one to be too long, but I did want to kind of go into the politics of what's taking place here between these two countries. If it gets to the point where Iran is attacked, Iran's response to this needs to be the exact response that the Soviet Union would have had, to launch every last weapon they had in their arsenal in order to injure, cripple, break, meaning you may win this, but you are going to absolutely lose this. They don't have nuclear weapons. That is the only thing that they have at their disposal in order to protect themselves. And I suggest that that is going to be the threat. I'll end this here. Like I said, I don't want this one to be too long. Someone gave a super chat. And I want to read all of those because I absolutely appreciate when people help and support the content. Let's see. This is a worrying series of events, if I'm being honest. I mean, we're literally talking about the United States as a predator nation trying to take down Iran without any support from any of the other countries because they completely disagree with the tactics that are being used. These same tactics are being used to try to take down Venezuela. This is also a situation where the United States is talking about sanctions on countries because of the contracts and the things that they buy. So people deciding to buy a Russian-made weapons platform because it's just a better-made weapons platform, or they're using Chinese products in Britain. You know, the United States is taking issue with all of this. It's a weird thing to have a capitalist nation to be outdone and to use a political instrument to try to make up for the defects in their inability to match the products. But that is indeed what's taking place. Turkey, India, all these countries are supposed to be allies of ours. Britain, Germany, where we're attacking Germany for getting a gas pipeline. This stuff is utterly amazing. It's utterly amazing. Let's see, who's here? Wayne Wilson. I will sign up to support tonight. Thank Wayne. I appreciate it, man. Donald Sneed. Thank you, Donald Sneed. Please leave a comment. I like your comments. Charles Piera. Iran only needs to interfere with the Strait of Hormuz. It's so small, no need for bigger operations, and that alone will destroy the world economy. Yes. And that's a threat, but I guess when I'm looking at this stuff, I'm looking at this stuff from a nuclear option, a threat that's so, painful. Like, for example, there is no military solution for North Korea. None. Donald Trump could bellyache, browbeat, scream, yell. Donald Trump can take a dump on Twitter. He has no military option for North Korea. The moment that you attack North Korea is going to launch a volley of missiles that's going to hit Japan. right off the bat, Japan. And, by the way, potentially Hawaii. That's assuming that the missile can get that far and that can be that accurate. I'm just making a point that any attack on North Korea would be an utter destruction for allies of the United States, making it a no-go. It's his nuclear option, even if he didn't have nuclear weapons. I'm saying Iran and governments like that have to be looking for those type of options, because if they don't, they're going to find themselves predator or a prey for a nation like the United States. I mean, come on. I asked this question earlier. There is no such thing as international law. If you have a Superman, or if you have a country that it considers itself a superpower, that it's above that law, then that law doesn't exist. I mean, come on. How can you have a situation where you're saying, yes, there is a such thing as international law, but it's completely flouted by world powers? It's only applicable to smaller nations that can't defend themselves against the larger nations. At that point, it's not a law anymore. It's something that some have to follow, but others don't. Selective justice is not justice. So, I guess that's my point. Executive Chess Guide. Know this topic upsetting, but don't destroy the set. Donald Sneed. It's both parties. Nancy Pelosi threatened Britain. Yes, it is both parties. It is a bipartisan consensus, by the way, on China and to some degree Russia, but with the exception that Donald Trump is trying to normalize relations with Russia. But this is a bipartisan consensus on this stuff. But understand why. That makes perfect sense. I mean, the same people who are pushing the Republican Party is pushing the Democratic Party. It's still money in their pockets. And if you're talking about corporations, their standpoint is they want to open up markets for business. If the government that's in Iran is not there, then maybe they can open up markets to sell their Coca-Cola and build their McDonald's. This is a profit-making enterprise for the Democrats. So yeah, the companies, whichever side of the aisle you're on, are going to be on board for opening up these markets, including Venezuela. There's a bipartisan consensus. And again, even the media runs right along with it. I mean, this is supposed to be this thing of paying fucking terrorists. And this is in the open. I don't understand how media looks at this and gives this kind of a clean bill of health. We worked with an opposition and a government openly, brazenly, going so far as to pretend as if the elected government of that government wasn't the elected government of that government. That's an amazing thing. We are working with the opposition before he declared himself as interim president, had a conversation with Donald Trump and with Pence in order to kind of give him the nod to go for it. We're backing you up. The only support that he had was from that superpower, because he did not have grassroots support. And that fell apart tremendously when he went out there and screamed for an uprising and nobody showed up. If he was in America, he would be locked up by now for treason. But because Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo and Abrams are looking for any pretext to invade Venezuela, either with a proxy army or with Blackwater Army or with some force in order to depose Maduro from that government, they don't touch him. They don't touch him. World War I, I have a hard time saying that, but World War I started by something that was entirely innocuous. I mean, not innocuous, but it wasn't a major event politically. It snowballed into a major political event as forces with a carved up world brimming with this notion of military and all this other stuff ends up getting into these weird military alliances that snowball into multiple forces going at one another. It turned into a world war. Now, you may call me hyperbolic on this front, but how do you know? How do you know? The people during that time had no idea what was going to take place after Archduke Ferdinand was shot. They had no idea. I tell you this, if you would have said this is going to turn into a world war and you're going to lose 20 million people, they would have said, you're being hyperbolic, sir. You also would have been right. I don't understand how people are okay with this. That's all. I honestly don't. Like how your government is screaming that Iran is a dictatorship. And Donald Trump is out there dancing with a sword with a totalitarian government, giving kudos to a guy who essentially had a mob hit on a reporter from the Washington Post. Like, at a certain point, the credibility and legitimacy just falls away. The king has no clothes. And yet, he pretends as if he does, striding through the street. Twigs and berries floating back and forth. We are hurting people, man. We're hurting people. Balthazar, technically, no one can be locked up for treason in the United States because treason is constitutionally defined as assisting a country we're in congressionally declared war with. We aren't at war with any country. Oh, God, man. You're absolutely right, Balthazar. You're absolutely right. The authorization of military force is for Iraq. We're not in Iraq. People are still dying in Afghanistan, but apparently they're trying to come to some terms with, I guess, warlords. Man, you're absolutely right. That's even more depressing. I gotta be honest, I'm really concerned by this is disconcerting. I mean, the ramp up to the Iraq war. Look, a lot of the stuff that's going to come out in the media is being used as a weapon here. So they're ratcheting up tensions, using media to ratchet up tensions, if that makes sense. The 120,000 troop stuff that Donald Trump said, that's not true. Well, there might have been plans, or they might have just leaked that into the media itself in order to use it as a threat. Again, a lot of these things are being used as threats against those countries. So just be aware. I think I gave a decent rundown of what's taking place. And I'll leave it here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.